I'll admit that some days it feels a little more like 110. I don't know if y'all can see this. You see the nuns. That's really good. Well, that's it. That's my thought. What we have here is, it's actually a cartoon by a woman named Frida Hamar. She is on Instagram and on the internet. It's called The Odd Nun Out. And I've been following her cartoons. She's really funny. So this one says, I'm going to pray. And this one says, I'm going astray. And I thought, that's kind of the epitome of this whole spiritual integrity thing, isn't it? It's all about choices. So there's been a lot of talk this past month about the definition of spiritual, of or concerning the spirit, and the definition of integrity, which would be the state of being whole or undivided, the quality of being honest, moral principle, all that good stuff. And so we bring those two words together, spiritual integrity, and it sounds pretty straightforward, right? Anybody have any trouble with this area of their lives? Reverend Pat, put your hand down. We identify with stuff, don't we? Little stuff, big things, little things. And we're sort of moving along, tickety-boo, everything's just fine, and then bam, right out of the blue, something gets us. Doug and I just had the craziest month at the Dome's Nature Retreat. We had 54 guests in groups of varying sizes, pretty much back to back. And in the middle of it, rain and hail and a muddy west side road and the biggest windstorm in 80 years in New Mexico. 20,000 people on our mountain were without power. We were without power for 6 days, and during that time we had two groups. Now, the first group, they were young and a little cocky, like, I was when I was the same age, and probably still now a bit. And they just simply refused to take any instructions, so they created a whole lot of extra work for us. We don't need four-wheel drive. And the little city cars with those little tiny wheels going up and down that road. Oh, it was fun. And then the second group, I think they just weren't mentally prepared for some of the inconveniences that Mother Nature had chosen for us that week, and they just got grumpy. It's a funny thing. I really look forward to our guests coming. It's very rare. Like, we have amazing people. In 20 months, we've had people from 44 states and 27 countries. We've had people from all over the world, and it's so great. And you get to see that common ground. And then every once in a while, you don't see any common ground. The whole thing kind of reminded me when I was a little kid once. My mom was going to visit a friend for tea, and her friend had her two nieces visiting. So she said, well, bring Lily along. And, well, it was Susie then. But anyway, bring your daughter, and she can, play with my nieces, and we'll have tea. Translation, get them out of my hair for a little while. So anyway, I went. I was all excited. I was going to make a new friend, and the girls brought out their coloring books and coloring, and the three of us knelt in a row on the floor, and I was in the middle. And then I found out very quickly what the game really was. If I went outside the lines on the left side, the girl on the left pinched me. And if I went outside the lines on the right side, the girl on the right pinched me. So here I thought I was going to go make new friends, and what really happened was I learned how to color. And that's kind of what this month was about. I learned how to color. So I got thrown off balance. I was feeling resentful and tired, storms and no power and people who needed babysitting and I really wasn't doing very well in the compassion department either. I remember when my mom was in her last days, one of her home care nurses said, "Well, your mother does not suffer fools gladly, does she?" And I hate to think that that's genetic, but there's sometimes I have to look in the mirror and shake my head. The bottom line is I did not feel unity with these groups, and I forgot to remember that my unity is with God. It can be tricky for me. We see all these different ways of being out there in the world that we don't identify with, and unless we have the means to keep our equilibrium, everything begins to feel a little disconnected. So anyway, back to these guests, finally these groups are gone and the weather has simmered down, and Doug and there's another big group coming in, and Doug and I are madly cleaning away. Okay, Doug was cleaning and I was still just mad. But I had the stories going. Oh man, it was nut city up here, okay? What they thought of me, what I wanted to tell them, the reviews I was gonna write. Yeah, Airbnb, look out. And all the while, I'm sort of percolating that I have to do this talk about spiritual integrity. Wah, wah. And so I align myself with spirit. Boo! And I know everything is for me, not to me. And I questioned myself for days. And then it arrived, that thing that that just lands in your lap. And as soon as it does, it's true. And I had an insight into how many times I have ruminated over these kinds of stories. And I wondered why, because I actually really do know better. And I could see clearly how these stories just keep my mind in turmoil, and then I'm not focusing on what is real. And over, they just sort of bounce me out of alignment. And then I feel like I'm out of spiritual integrity. And that's the big button. That feeling that I've done something bad. I'm out of integrity. I didn't do that the way I should. I know better. What's wrong with my spirituality? Maybe I'm not spiritual after all. Oh my God, I have to give a talk on it. I'm a sham. This is a sneaky one, and I actually think it's quite common, some sense that we're not spiritual enough, right? We're not, if I was as good as Gandhi, if I was as good as Jesus, this and more you shall do. There's I think, a kind of a common sense that spirituality has some sort of intangible quality that some people have managed to achieve, and certainly we've read about them and studied them, but that we can't quite get there. We are mind and body, evidently, but we are also spiritual beings. We're living in physical form and living in the physical world, and that's always been the paradox. It feels like we're in a body, but we have a sense of something else, a sense of something bigger, a sense of something that we can't quite wrap our brains around, and that we don't always feel like we can reach. But here's the truth of it. Each of us is living a spiritual life. I don't care who you are, where you are, what you're doing. Each of us is living a spiritual life. We have our own journey, and we have to recognize both our differences and our connections with each other. Holmes gave a great story about this. Also in the Beverly Hills Lectures, available at our bookstore. Seriously, this is one of my favorite books about Holmes or by Holmes that I've seen yet. So he tells a little story. He says, suppose each one of us goes out into an unknown country and works an acre of land. There are 250 acres, and each one will take an acre in the same land. There are not 250 different kinds of creative processes in the soil. There is only one kind of creative process common to the 250 acres. But we are people, so each one plants his plot the way he likes it. Then everything is different when it comes up, and people who see it say, "Here are 250 individual acres of land." There's no such thing. There are 250 individualized plots of one creativity operating through this soil. And this is exactly the way it is with your subjective, I'd put a sticker over that. How do you like that? Mind. And mine. I think many of us have had moments where we've experienced a sense of oneness, where time and space and physicality seem to melt away. And you feel like the whole acreage, one creativity. And there's a sense of beauty and peace and oneness in that. And there are a lot of spiritual practices that are designed to create and sustain that very feeling. And there's the rub. In that state, we feel all spiritual. Isn't it nice? Oh, my skin melted and I was just air and I could feel love for everybody. And we feel spiritual when we're like that. But when we get triggered and tell our stories, not so much. Are we not spiritual then? Could we be spiritual one day and not spiritual the next? So we try harder. Yoga, Siva, meditation, classes and practices to retrain the brain, and there's lots of things that we can do to encourage that sense of being divine, to have it occupy more of our lives, and to live as a bigger idea of ourselves. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, be the wonder that you are. This is something we seek. Spiritual integrity is the flame we hold aloft when we uphold and illuminate aspects of God: love, mind, body, soul, spirit, truth, and principle. So nourish the body and mind, foster love, care for the soul, live from the standpoint of principle, and find yourself living in integrity with truth and spirit. One of my go-to stuck on a desert island and you only get one book is called I Am That. It's based on talks with Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, and if you can say it, you can borrow my book. And a student asks, what is wrong with me, wrong with my mind? It's restless and greedy of the pleasant and afraid of the unpleasant. And the Maharaj says, what is wrong with seeking the pleasant and shirking the unpleasant? Between the banks of pain and pleasure, the river of life flows. It is only when the mind refuses to flow with life and gets stuck at the banks that it becomes a problem. By flowing with life, I mean acceptance, letting come what comes and go what goes. Desire not, fear not, and observe the actual as and when it happens. For you are not what happens, you are to whom it happens. So this last month deepened my relationship with practicing spiritual integrity. It's a really big hole I'm digging out there. And one of the things I needed to practice was compassion. One group was unhappy, and that's no fun. I'm sure they would have preferred feeling happy, but they were just out of their element. And the others were young people, and they just haven't learned some stuff yet. So they got the world by the tail, and really it's not that big a deal. We had to do some extra cleaning, a bit of running around, whatever. I realized that I'd put my attention on making new friends with strangers and not on my relationship with God, and I needed to refocus. So we all have our little toolkit. Some of the ways that I can do that, I can look out the window, which basically where we live is stunning in every direction. Just look at how stunningly beautiful it is and allow that beauty to lift me up, because honestly, it takes about 3 seconds if I remember to do it. I can listen to music, or even the sound of wind chimes in the right harmonic for me can just transport me instantly. And in fact, the group we just had left these as a present. And it literally, like a second of that, and I'm, wow, I'm just somewhere else. I love it. And it was a really nice present. I learned that it gives me huge satisfaction to clean the bathroom mirror until there's not a single speck on it, so that all I can see is pure reflection. If there's this, if there's a little spot on it, you see the spot. But if you clean it perfectly, it just takes you to another dimension. Isn't that cool? So while I'm cleaning, I can find this cool thing, the Zen of cleaning. I can observe emotionally driven thoughts and immediately reframe to something that I know is the truth. Let the errant thoughts return to their native nothingness. Live from a standpoint of principle. I do what I know is correct based on my relationship with God, my spiritual journey, my beliefs. Now, it so happens the science of mind teaching aligns nicely with the journey that I've been on, and it provides specific tools for practice so that when I'm out of harmony, I can bring myself back, and it feels correct. The teaching feels correct. I don't bump up against stuff and go, eh. That's kind of important. When I keep my mind in heaven, I am in spiritual integrity. I'm in integrity with myself. And as Barbara read, if I know there's some operation in my own consciousness that can produce good for me and I don't use it, I am dissatisfied and unhappy because I know I'm not living up to the highest levels of my own consciousness. And then I don't feel well in my mind and my body. And this is how being out of alignment with my sense of integrity feels for me. It doesn't mean I'm no longer spiritual. I've just got caught up in the reeds along the shore, and I need to get back into the flow. There's been some discussion this month about the relationship between mind, body, and spirit, so I'll dive in. Body, with a capital B, is a divine idea. The spacesuit is how this idea is clothed and appears on earth. Body as a divine idea is an aspect of God, but our true identity is not found in the spacesuit. Ask anybody who's living inside a body that's not working very well for them. They'll tell you it doesn't define them. It's the physical appearance that they have to deal with, but it's not the truth of who they are. And the mind, it's just full of stories. And they're useful, like signposts or wake-up calls. But these stories are the truth of how we are, not who we are. And they're an opportunity to realign. And this happens to me maybe more often than I'd like, but just the other day I was thinking about this young couple that I know in Costa Rica. And, you know, they'd barely broken 30, and they're building their dream home overlooking the sea, and they're raising a family. They got their citizenship there. They've worked very hard to create a good financial stream for themselves, and I'd just seen a post about them, and I was thinking, wow, you guys, lock and load. And I recognized that I had a little bit of jealousy going on there. And as soon as I realized I felt a bit jealous, then my not spiritual enough tape kicked in. And right away, though, I observed it. And I was like, wow, I can turn that around. And I started to feel gratitude for the amazing things I do have in my life. and also for the teaching moment. And these golden moments are kind of threaded throughout our lives, and we can either see them as baseball bats designed to beat us over the head for not doing what we ought to do, or we can see them as opportunities to recognize something, see the truth of it, declare victory, and move on. And when all is said and done, when we're ready to give up our stories, and as the Maharaj said, letting come what comes and go what goes, then we can put our attention on what is real. Correct identification, our unification with God. So, here is my real story. You ready? I was born into a human body. I'm not really sure how this happened. I mean, I understand parts of it. I have 2 sons. But beyond that, I have only a notion that there's a universal life force that I call God that occupies every single particle of all existence. And that means that I'm a part of it, and it is a part of me. And my life is a spiritual journey. And that journey is to unravel what it means to be part of a universal life force that occupies every single particle of all existence. That's it. It's my journey. I occupy a body. I have a mind, physical manifestations of the divine, and my spiritual journey is mine alone. It's up to me how I interpret it and live it. And we know this stuff. When we stop and listen and feel within a framework of what we know to be correct and act accordingly, then we are in integrity with ourselves and with our beliefs. I can make up a story based on how I wanted something to go, but if I'm doing fear or jealousy or anger, I've lost touch with what's real. And I know that at least on some level, I'm out of alignment and out of integrity. And when I'm in alignment with what feels right and correct, and I practice the tools that I've learned to embody the activity of oneness, then I feel I am in spiritual integrity. You know, Jesus said, it is done unto you as you believe. And sometimes that gets shortened to, it's done to you as you believe. And it's not like, you know, somebody comes up and squirts a bottle of ketchup all over my new shirt, and I'm like, hey, what did you do that for? It's not done to you as you believe in quite in quite that way. But it is done as you believe, and it's done for you as you believe, and it's done with you as you believe, because you are the embodiment of what you believe. It's up to us to plumb the depths of ourselves to learn what those beliefs are. And then be who you are. Be where you are. Be what you are. Be the wonder that you are. When I am able to settle into the knowingness of this for myself, I have a sense that through that feeling of oneness comes love. And through love comes compassion. And out of this trinity comes peace. And in this place, I know I'm divine. And once we know something, we can't unknow it. And there's no pretending otherwise. As Ollie the spider says, and you'll meet him in a second, you'll know when you know that you know you're divine. So I'll close with this. Ollie the spider danced a jig right on the back of Irving the pig. Irving said, "Ollie, you are so light." To which he replied,
I am light, you are right.
Ollie the spider said with a smile,
There's something I know, though it took me a while. The thing that I like the most by far is knowing that truly I am a star. Irving thought he was smelly and big. Irving had always thought he was a pig. And he said to his friend, do you think it's okay if I prefer to be seen instead as a ray? Ollie was still as he thought it through, till his heart was pure and he knew what to do. And he said to his friend, you already shine, and you'll know when you know that you know you're divine. Yes, you'll know when you know that you know you're divine.
He said to his friend, you already shine, and you'll know when you know that you know you're divine. Thank you very much.